All right, so it looks like we still have a couple people joining us, but I will go ahead and get started just so we can give our wonderful speakers plenty of time to talk and then you all plenty of time to ask questions. So once again, you've probably already met me at some point today or yesterday, but my name is Emma Wolfe. I'm a clinical psychology PhD student at the University of Virginia, working with Dr. Bethany Peachman. And Emily and Crystal, do you want to quickly unmute and introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to some and welcome to others. But my name is Crystal. I'm a rising second year at Duke University working with Dr. Timothy Strawman.
Hi everyone, welcome. My name's Emily Hirsch. I'm a rising fourth year clinical psychology PhD student at UMass Boston, working with Dr. Jean Rhodes at the Center for Evidence-Based Mentoring.
Thank you so much, Emily and Crystal. And we are so excited to be here today with our two amazing speakers, Dr. Edmund Neuhaus and Dr. Sara Sagui-Henson. I will go ahead and give them a brief introduction, and then the two of them will dive in and start talking a little bit about their careers, what brought them here, and sort of the focus of the industry panel today, or sort of what are the kind of differentiating factors between the types of roles that they have, what distinguishes all of these different, career paths that we see from each other. So there'll be plenty of opportunity to ask questions during the Q&A as well. So Dr. Edmund Neuhaus is a board certified clinical psychologist and innovator focused on the integration of mental health care and technology. He has developed products and systems that converge evidence-based treatments with digital technology to improve outcomes at scale. Over 3 decades, he has embraced career pivots to pursue innovative approaches to match treatment to individuals and their unique needs and life contexts. 2 principles have anchored his career choices: complacency is the enemy, and create opportunity out of adversity. Starting in academic medicine at McLean Hospital, Harvard Medical School, he led the largest CBT treatment program with integrated treatment outcome research and the pre-doctoral psychology internship. In 2009, he left academic medicine to found a startup providing e-learning and transdiagnostic CBT. Subsequently, he transitioned to a chief clinical officer role, overseeing the treatment of 40,000 patients annually, and led the effort to develop a custom EHR measurement system and clinical decision support. From there, he went all in with digital therapeutics to develop a DTX to deliver psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy based on his behavioral psychedelics approach. Most recently, he was the lead clinical content designer for Pfizer's first commercial digital product, which provides behavioral treatment for individuals living with migraine. Living in San Diego, he embraces the importance of a healthy outdoor lifestyle and maintaining strong connections with family, friends, and having some fun in the process. We're very glad to have you, Ed. And secondly, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sara Sagui-Henson, who is a health psychologist and clinical research leader with over a decade of experience generating a decade of evidence generation experience and a passion for leveraging technology to solve important healthcare problems. She loves using science and data to evaluate and validate how innovative products and services in the digital health space can improve equitable access and health outcomes. For the past 5 years, Sara has been a research scientist at Modern Health, where she has helped the company, 1, design and execute a portfolio of high-quality strategic clinical research studies that differentiates them and informs clinical product strategy, and 2, translates and leverages compelling results from real-world evidence so go-to-market teams can highlight the value of a company's product and services to their members, clients, prospects, in the larger market. Outside of her professional work, Sara is a mom to 2 toddlers and is passionate about mentoring. She cares deeply about fostering an inclusive company culture and co-founded an employee research group at Modern Health to support working parents and caregivers, employee resource group. We're very happy to have you, Sara. And without further ado, Ed, if you'd like to go ahead and start with your presentation.
Okay, I got my mute off, I think, and all right. So I like to start at the beginning. And so I was in my 4th year of grad school in clinical psychology, applying for an internship. I cast a wide net. Oops, I didn't get accepted anywhere. That wasn't the plan for sure. So after the shock and embarrassment of the whole thing, I'm like, okay, I need another plan. And so I decided, okay, I'll work on my dissertation, try to get that done. Didn't exactly work out, but I was close. And, reapply. And, one of the painful things I did was look at my applications that I sent, in the previous year. Oh, that was painful. They were bad. I wouldn't have accepted myself, and it really got me thinking, okay, what do I need to do? So the big lesson that I learned was to be clear and focused, like stake my claim. Why did I want to go where I went? And, I really wanted to go to McLean Hospital, and worked out, and I put my career sights on hospital psychiatry. I will say that, just a quick diversion, it's in character, if you will. So I was actually accepted into the psychodynamic program at McLean Hospital, but my kind of career move was the day in my psychotherapy seminar. I was like, who wants to do cognitive therapy with Phil Lewandowski? And people are groaning. I'm like, I'll do that. Like, that was my career move, because that got me into CBT and just looking at hospital psychiatry and academic medicine in the real evidence-based way. So, I worked in a lot of different programs. I think one of my claims to fame was working with programs that were closing and then had to reopen into something else. Eventually, I kind of got my dream job, if you will. I took over, actually, it was a failing partial hospital program. The psychology internship was kind of going down in flames. And that was kind of this, how can I create an integrated program with, a lot of others helping? Because it's never an I, it's always a we. And so I worked hard to lead and innovate, and we created the partial hospital, the adult partial CBT program and psychology training program, the internship that was very, very important to me and to the hospital, and treatment outcome research. And, after about 10 years, so this is kind of mid-aughts, so mid-2000s, I'm like, is this all there is? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I did it, but now what? And so it got me thinking about things. And through happenstance, I met someone who had an e-learning startup company. And I'm like, maybe I can do what I do at McLean and kind of make it and scale it. So that really was the new idea. So basically, I walked away from my dream job to do a startup company. Go figure, right? I mean, I had a few little kids, family, how am I going to do this? And it was really about, I had this, a vision of scaling and like technology, people and technology, and figuring out, well, people have to go to McLean Hospital to get what they get. It's not anywhere else. And I'm like, we can do it, more broadly. So that pivot really began my kind of new career in converging people and technology. So Emma gave kind of the synopsis, but I kind of look at my pre-digital career. In a sense, technology was a sideshow, right? I mean, I used it for, Microsoft Word, Excel spreadsheets, doing data analysis, whatever, but it wasn't like the main thing. And then it became digital. So it started like early digital in e-learning. And then I went on to designing an EHR system. And one of the key things, and one of the speakers in a session I attended yesterday talked about, one of the hardest things to get done, to do, is to get providers to change behavior. Because if you look at it, it's like, what is a barrier? Now, granted, EHR technology back then, 10, 12 years ago was kind of a cluster, but, we had a vision, it was going to be better. And I think there are a lot of good things about it, but it was hard, and it required people to change their workflows, and how they did things was going to be different. And then I had an opportunity, as I call the blue sky, digital therapeutics in the psychedelics industry, working with one of the most talented software people I've ever come across. And, looking at how can we kind of change the world. I would say, though, the psychedelics industry had a meteoric rise and a bit of a meteoric fall. So a little bit of a crash and burn. And, so here I am doing more consulting. I recently worked at Pfizer, developing a new product. And I think that the work at Pfizer was really a good example of, and we'll probably get to it, of, so what's the research evidence? You know, we talk about implementation science, right? But does that transfer directly into digital? Not so much. And, you know, we can get to that, but just really that it's not an easy transition, if you will. So before I go on, so I like to say roles change, but my values are fixed. So Emma mentioned, you know, complacency is the enemy. That's really the growth mindset. So these are my values that kind of keep my North Star going. Creating opportunity out of adversity. You know, things don't always work out. And even when they do work out, it's not always easy and it's hard, which is fine. But where's that opportunity that you can create? And of course, relationships always matter. I mean, it doesn't matter how much technology there is, you know, who are your coworkers, your colleagues, your friends, your mentors, your mentees, your students, whatever. Those are really important. I mean, some of my, you know, I just talked to an intern of mine from 1997. I talked to her yesterday, you know, and I co-authored a paper, that behavioral psychedelics paper, with a former intern as well. And, you know, I talk regularly with different colleagues. So that really is the glue of holding everything together. And then you got to be practical, know your craft and understand the context, because you can have the greatest idea, doesn't mean there's a job for you. How do you put those things together? So just to give you a quick view of one of the things that I do, I call it my offer, right? So when you're consulting, it's your offer. Like, why would people care, right? So for me, it's all about behavior change. I mean, it's probably more about that, but the last I checked, any major life transformation requires some kind of behavior change. And so I have 3 pillars that I use: design, engagement, and outcomes, which I also say it's behavioral science plus Sesame Street plus the hero's journey. So, okay, behavioral science, behavior change. What does Sesame Street have to do with anything? My guess is people have watched Sesame Street before, and it got your attention. They were doing human-centered design before the concept of human-centered design was even invented, right? They had kids watching screens. If eye gaze went away, no, we're not using that. You know, it's like, what is it about engagement, right? And then the hero's journey is really story. Like, people have a story, and helping them tell their life story. So if you look at design, engagement, and outcomes, it's not only engagement with the app, even though we know that the most likely outcome of someone using a digital therapeutic or a digital product is they'll stop using it, right? You have to keep them engaged to then translate that to the outcome of their everyday life. So just in a nutshell, my work at Pfizer, here's another thing, is like, titles and roles don't always go together. Okay, but the title was lead content designer. Well, it wasn't advertised. I didn't get the job because it was advertised. I got it because the guy I worked with, Dave Keene, and the psychedelics company at Thai Life Sciences, he's the head of Pfizer Digital Global. And he calls me up, he goes, "Ed, we need you to do this thing." I was like, okay. So it's really a treatment designer, how you converge content and software. My craft, if I call it, like, the thing that I really focus on is, how do you take that, what's in that treatment manual, and put it into a digital product? I mean, you can look at any manual, you know, 100 pages, 200 pages, whatever. You got to get that essence of what is it going to be? How are people going to engage with that? How are they going to use it? How is it going to be relevant? And so that's what, you know, we did. We developed the product, the MVP, the product testing, going through all. I never actually had my work as scrutinized by, you know, 3 attorneys, 3 regulatory people, the medical staff, every word, you know, okay, you can't say this, you can't say that. So you have to really be in alignment, and it made a better product, I feel like. And so as we kind of wind down, so, all right, you're here, career panel, future jobs, opportunities in digital mental health, understand the context. World's changing. Like, yesterday and today is not the same as tomorrow. Like, literally, like, things weekly, monthly are changing. And what is your craft? It comes back to your market, your fit with the market. And I would say, just a plug about AI is not going anywhere. If you human expertise and AI is what's really important here. You know, that's going to make the most safe and effective, but how it's all going to happen, I don't know. And so just wrapping it up, where you start is not where you finish. Who knows? Be open, you know, think of your own growth, creating your opportunities, relationships. So I'll stop there and look forward to our next, let me just get out of my stop share here.
That was fantastic,
Okay.
Ed. Thank you so much. I especially like, you know, both the kind of complacency is the enemy and, you know, the adversities and opportunity pieces, but also, you know, honing in on that piece about the Sesame Street metaphor and sort of what it is that you're bringing to the table in product. I think is such an interesting, I love that analogy. All right, Sarah, whenever you're ready, the stage is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for having us, the Student SIG. I'm always so impressed with what you're doing. And I love doing these panels because I also get to learn from other folks. And Ed, our talks are so well aligned because I'm also going to talk about values today as, you know, guiding posts and helping you make decisions in your career. So I'm going to do something similar as Ed, where talk about, you know, storytelling, using storytelling to talk about my career path and, you know, hopefully have some nuggets of wisdom to share. I'm about 7 years out of my PhD, and I joined the startup digital mental health industry as a clinical researcher right out of my postdoc. So that's my perspective and kind of where I'm coming from, you know, the VC funded startup world. And I wasn't sure if I was supposed to put a disclosure in here, but I just wanted to say that I'm going to be talking about where I work at Modern Health, and it is a commercial product, and I'm also employed there and receive salary and stock options. So first I wanted to just start off introducing myself, and I wanted to talk about all my different identities. And I actually recently learned that this is a really great practice to do if you can, because from an equity perspective, we really are more than just our work titles. I know I definitely have a lot of other things going on outside of work. So I'm Sarah. My identity most relevant for this career panel is that I'm an associate principal research scientist at a B2B2C digital mental health company, meaning business to business to consumer. So we're selling to primarily employers and payers of mental health services as a benefit. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the end user is the employees of the benefit. And I'm a research health psychologist. So I'm not a clinical psychologist, and health psych is very near and dear to my heart. I constantly use and think of the biopsychosocial and cultural model, and I also think about that a lot in my free time and just all the connections between mental health, emotional health, physical, behavioral, spiritual, you know, all of those types of things that really informs me. I'm also a Californian. Though I did spend 5 years in North Carolina, as we were talking about before the panel started. I'm a native Southern Californian, but I now live on the Central Coast / Bay Area in Santa Cruz. And there is a NorCal, SoCal rivalry, but I think I'm a convert to Northern California. And I work fully remote. And so Modern Health is a remote first workplace. I'm also a woman, and I'm a mom of 2 toddlers. I have a 4-year-old named Charlotte, and a 2-year-old named Julian. And then on a little bit of a deeper level, I just kind of wanted to mention that in reflecting about myself and how I've created my values and how those have guided my career journey, I'm a supporter. So on every personality test that you can take, you know, the Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram, you know, for better or worse, it always puts me as a helper or supporter. And so I really find a lot of joy out of genuinely connecting with other people, sharing our common humanity and supporting people in whatever ways I can. So I love teaching and mentoring, and those are important pieces to my career. And then I'm also really deeply curious. And my high school nickname from my softball coach was 21 Questions. And so the combination to me of curious and supportive really suits me well as a researcher, because I'm always asking questions about how I can better support people's health and their mental health and their whole health. So that's a little bit about me. And now I'm going to talk about my career journey so far, as I put it. Super fun to hear about Ed's long journey, his pre-digital, his post-digital, and having multiple experiences post-digital. I'm on my first, digital. I'm on my first digital career. But I wanted to talk about my career as sort of chapters in a book, and talk about the gaps that aren't always apparent on a big CV, just looking at how your different roles panned out. And just like Ed, I kind of wanted to anchor on the importance of digging really deep and realizing what your personal and professional values are and how those relate to your career journeys. So values, you can think of values as, just like Ed said, like things that don't necessarily change. They're really like the principles that govern how you want to act. They're very different than goals. They're never really completed or accomplished, but they really help as directions and guideposts for our daily actions, for our yearly actions to decide where we want to go. So they're kind of like your professional purpose and your vision for yourself. We often think about the mission and the vision of the company, but what is your mission and your vision for yourself? And they can be any words or phrases that describe like how you want to show up. And so I did an exercise about a year ago, diving into my values, and I can share them here. They are supportive, unsurprisingly. I want to work and be in an environment where I feel supported by others, and I also get the opportunity to give back. Curious, so that's my kind of intellectual side. I want to, do things that I think are important and intellectually interesting. Growth-minded, Ed, we share that one. So constantly learning and growing, and opportunities for growth, within my current job or between jobs. And then the last one is balanced or flexible. And I put those in the same category. And for inspiration, I hope maybe if you could leave with something walking away from this talk to help clarify your values. Here are a couple of questions that you could ask yourself. One is fun. Imagine you're at your own retirement party years from now. Fingers crossed that we all get to retire. What do you hope you'll hear your colleagues, friends, and family say about you and your work? Another question is, what sort of person do you want to be at work? And then the last one is, think of a time when you felt most fulfilled and engaged in your professional life, and what made that experience so fulfilling for you. So I asked myself these questions. I looked at a number of different, descriptor words and came up with these. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, as I go through my career journey, how some of those values express themselves, and also what do you do when values are in conflict with each other sometimes? How do you weight and prioritize different values? So my first chapter is that I did an undergrad degree in psychology at Cal State Long Beach. I actually kind of struggled when I was entering into college. I had taken a psych class in high school, but I didn't find it that interesting. And so I started college as a mechanical engineering major. And I was really struggling with a lot of my classes and some of the college level math. I loved high school math, but the college math seemed different. And I eventually found my way to sociology and then psychology. And it was really there that I became a peer advisor, and I learned about research. We had research labs. I was really lucky that Cal State Long Beach was a very teaching focused school. So we had research labs where I got to be really involved. I got to join a health psychology lab in undergrad. And so I knew from that point that I really wanted to go to grad school. I still wasn't sure what my eventual career path would be. I just knew I kind of loved research and I wanted more time. So I got into a PhD program in health psych at UNC Charlotte. I was really interested in things like stress and coping and positive psychology and how that impacted health and behavior. I was really doing more basic science research there. That was what was really exciting to me in my early 20s was like, you know, psychophysiology research and being really theory driven and just exploring. And I was doing some teaching there as well. And I started to you know, think about careers in industry. I think at the time we kind of called them non-academic careers. And I went to some panels, but none of them, you know, quite struck me. So I decided to do a postdoc where I could do some more applied research, which was different than what I had done. And so I did a postdoc at UCSF, which brought me back to California in integrative medicine. And I was doing stress and health research there and mindfulness research. It was much more applied, which was great. I was doing clinical trials around mindfulness-based eating, clinical research. But it was here that I really learned about the science practice gap. I learned for the first time that there's a statistic that it takes like 15 or 17 years for research finding in the lab to make it into practice. And so that's sort of the earnest side of why I joined industry. And I'll share the earnest side and the practical side as well, which is the earnest side is like, I really saw this implementation gap. And I really wanted to be part of closing that gap and the scalability that Ed mentioned. And just the thought of using technology to solve healthcare problems was really interesting to me. And the ability for, you know, these RCTs were super interesting, but they were quite small and maybe not very scalable or ecologically valid. And so that's what really wanted me to, you know, see our evidence-based practices reach more people. And on the practical side, I was struggling to see a future for myself in a soft money position, which is what UCSF was. Even in a hard money position at a more research intensive university. Again, I didn't know my values at the time, but I was struggling to figure out if I wanted to be in like this very, you know, grant funded environment and with a lot of pressure. And basically I needed to stay in the Bay Area for my husband's job. And so the number of academic universities that I could apply for in academic jobs just kept getting smaller and smaller. And I knew that I didn't want to postdoc for like 5 or 6 more years waiting for that tenure track job. At the same time, as you can see, the postdoc was ending in 2020. COVID happened and a lot of the academic jobs shut down. And I also got pregnant with my first, with my daughter. So I started applying and I landed a job at a place called Modern Health. I've been there for 5 years now. And I would say some of the things that really helped me get this position were kind of cold networking and cold calling. That's actually how I've kind of gotten all of my positions, which is not something that you typically hear advice on. But I just tried to find anybody in my network and say, hey, will you talk to me? Can I get to know the language? And I'll also mention that I always felt more like a generalist researcher. I had a lot of different interests, and in postdoc, I was in a research study on the microbiome and, you know, mindful eating and, you know, research in breast cancer survivors. And so I never felt like I had this really coherent program of research. And that actually suits me really well in industry because I can bring my expertise to kind of set our roadmap, but there are constraints on what the evidence we need is for business growth. So it's not like the sky's the limit, which felt really overwhelming for me. So if that is, you know, also resonating with you, then I think that's kind of a good signal. So really briefly, I work at a company called Modern Health now. I was their first research hire back in 2020. There was about 50 employees at the time. We had just raised our Series B funding. So we're a venture capital backed startup. We then raised money again at the end of 2020 and beginning of 2021. And that'll maybe be relevant in a moment when I talk about the hype cycle. But we sell to employers and we cover the spectrum of mental health needs all the way from prevention to treatment. We use a stratified or needs-based care model across many different pillars of health, including mental health, social health, physical health, that biopsychosocial model I was mentioning. We have global coverage, so 1 in 4 of our members are outside the United States, and we have providers in over 200 different countries that speak over 80 languages, and our whole app is translated into almost 20 languages. And just to put it further into context, because sometimes I think it's like, you know, what are these companies? And I don't really understand, but we're providing mental health services kind of like a healthcare benefit. And some of our clients include people like Pixar, Intel, Denny's, DoorDash, Live Nation, and Nextdoor, and Mattel. So what do I actually do there? Well, for the past 5 years, I've been really helping the company conduct evaluation and validation research. So doing evidence generation and sharing those results, both with our clinical product teams to help inform our actual services, and also externally through peer-reviewed publications and the translation of research. So my team really answers the question, like, how do we know that modern health's model, as we've said it, we really believe in stratified care and whole person care and prevention as well as treatment. How do we know that that works? And for whom does it work for? Who does it reach? So we're really working on generating evidence to support some of those key differentiators for us, like our global reach, for example. And science is really important at a digital health company. It needs to be part of the process early on. It helps drive business value. It helps drive the clinical product strategy. So what I'm really doing there is working on aligning the research strategy and like the kinds of research questions we'll ask. You could ask endless questions about this massive product and services that has coaching and therapy and self-guided digital resources and psychiatry and medication management. So part of the job is understanding the business side of it and figuring out how do our company priorities, how does our clinical research strategy link to our company priorities? So it's a little less about like knowledge for the sake of knowledge, but more targeted toward evaluating and really demonstrating the impact of this product. And so we do this a number of different ways, but we conduct real world evidence research with members that are using modern health. We publish scientific articles and present at conferences. That's something that I still enjoy doing. We have 10 peer-reviewed papers published as a company since I started, and about 25 conference presentations, and one of our clinical researchers presented at SDMH yesterday. We also work with academic partners and try to share evidence on every part of our platform. Okay, I know I'm taking a long time right now, so I'll just end with this, which is I kind of wanted to, show this before I end and mention that the startup VC-funded digital health industry has been on kind of a journey in the past 5 years. So this is the amount of funding that was poured into digital health in the last 10 years. And you can see that there was a huge spike due to COVID and the expanded access to telehealth. At the same time, a few companies went public and had kind of a rough go at it. And so coupled with a few other things, the appetite for investing in digital health has slowed a lot since then. And many investors have changed their tune from growth at all costs, meaning, for example, Modern Health went from 50 employees when I got hired to 400 employees 2 years later. They've changed that tune to profitability. So there were a number of layoffs at these companies in 2023 and 2024, like also in the larger tech industry. And so investors are really waiting to see how a few key digital health company exits go this year, like Hinge and Omada. So I wanted to mention this in case you're interested, and just end with really trying to get a grip on the business of digital health, who's paying for what stakeholders are the products and services addressing, and what needs of those stakeholders they're addressing, and are those needs aligned with the right stakeholder who's paying for it. I highly recommend getting on Crunchbase and start to get familiar with companies and understanding different payment models between direct to consumer and business to business. And this is the Gartner hype cycle, which folks have shared with me. They think potentially digital health is on right now. So in the peak of inflated expectations may have been that 2020, 2021 period, and we're going through the trough of disillusionment and about to hit the slope of enlightenment and the plateau of productivity. So I say all that because I do understand and recognize that it might be a difficult time to break into the business. And I'm hoping, Ed and I can share and hear from the rest of you all on experiences on how to do that. But this is just another example of some of the things that are currently like AI and longevity research, who are at the top of the Gartner hype cycle right now. So thank you all so much. I know that was a long one. I probably went way over, but I really appreciate your time and listening, especially at the end of the day of this conference. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was absolutely fantastic. I definitely appreciate not only your conversation on values, but your realness with what the industry is like right now. It makes me think that we need this whole like a whole panel discussion, a whole talk on like the business side of digital mental health and that, that cycle. These are all such interesting pieces. So at this point, we're going to shift into the Q&A. So I will take a second here to pause and see if anybody in the chat would like to put something into the chat or to come and unmute and ask a question. But otherwise, I have some prepared. So I will go ahead. Looks like we have one question from Alyssa. Thank you, Alyssa. Alyssa asks, any career advice as to what career prospects, in addition to teaching, might exist after the PhD is earned, what should be explored while earning a PhD, or who should be networked with as somebody who is balancing 20 years of experience with a whole new career? Anyone can feel free to jump in and respond.
I mean, I will say that things are moving. Digital mental health is a moving target, and I really go back to kind of what it, the thing, the consultant market fit. There's another way, the candidate market fit, right? Like, what do you have that can match with the context? And I mean, truth be told, I mean, Sarah was just saying, I mean, it's, if you follow the money, right now is not a great time with money. I mean, it's starting to look up, but it's still a little out there. So, yeah, I mean, you got to pay bills. You got to find something that works. It's tricky right now. I mean, it's tricky for me. There are things that I, thought were going to work and then they don't. And then I'm kind of bobbing and weaving. So, Sarah, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point, Ed. And I think, the first question is what career prospects might exist after the PhD is earned? There really are a lot. Like, it does feel like a cliff when you graduate, and that's how it felt for me. And it felt like, how am I going to do this? But I really do believe that there are more people with a PhD working outside of academia than within. I don't know, don't quote me on that, but there's really not as many academic jobs as there are PhDs. So, and we all find work somewhere. So I do just want to be encouraging. And one thing I didn't mention was, how would you want to apply your skills? So you're getting a PhD, and like one question that I know I had to ask myself and folks from my graduate program. I have actually a colleague here, Anne Marie, who is from my graduate program. We have to ask ourselves, like I had to ask myself, is health a non-negotiable? Is researching health a non-negotiable for me in my career, or would I want to apply my skills in other areas? I have a best friend from grad school who decided she only wanted to go into industry, and now she's working in transportation related behavior change. She's a director of behavioral science at a marketing agency that does messaging for helping people use public transit and bike riding. So for me personally, it was like health at all costs. Like I have to be doing something health related. But these are some of the questions that you could possibly ask yourself. So that's one thing. And the other thing is just the business acumen side of it. What Emma mentioned about, we could have a whole panel on it. I was definitely underprepared coming into industry and learned it all on the job. And I think there are more and more resources these days to figure out what is the business of healthcare in the United States, if that's primarily where you're gonna be functioning, because it's a weird ecosystem and it's a weird landscape. And I would recommend looking up the Iron Triangle, which is a public health concept. But it places 3 different stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem: payers, providers, and patients. And if a product or service is targeting one of those, it needs to appeal to the things that that stakeholder cares most about and was willing to pay for the most, between access for patients, quality for providers, and cost reduction for payers. So just understanding some of those business concepts, I think, might help you figure out where to land more.
Thank you both. Our next question from Daniel, thank you, Daniel, asks, are there any specific avenues or networks you'd recommend for connecting talent with digital mental health innovators or companies?
That's a big question. I mean, that is the question. And in my experience, it's a bit elusive, right? I mean, being the biomedical engineering. I mean, right now, my view, and curious Sarah's view, but okay, we've got existing products right now. We look at what's there is not what's next, right? So it's kind of, are we trying to get positions for what is now, or are we trying to get positions for what is the next generation, or the next modern health, if you will, right? And so I don't have a formula. I mean, it's principle. I mean, the things, to reiterate what Sarah said, relationship, networking, like you got to talk to people. I know it can sound like a drone, like, oh yeah, networking, but relationships matter. Like that's how you get the opportunities, talking to people, that you talk to someone and oh, I can do that, or there's an opportunity. So I leave it to Sarah for anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I feel like my next career goal is just to work with my friends, because that's how much relationships really matter. Is you you really want to enjoy the people that you work with. And so I do feel like networking can be hard when we're working all remote. And I love working remote. I don't want to go back into the office. But I realize that it can be challenging. Like maybe you came to SDMH hoping to network for job opportunities, and virtual conferences, they can be tough for that. And so you may have to get out in person a little bit more. And I think, specific avenues, I kind of only know my kind of go-to places for people with a clinical science degree, like in psychology or behavioral medicine. And so this Society Behavioral Medicine, Therapists in Tech, and the Well Network for Women in Digital Health, those are some of my go-to, but biomedical engineering is a great one that we really need more people. So I don't know specific avenues other than when you do network, which is just relationship building. It is just getting to know people on a real level. The best people that you network with, you actually have connections that are outside of work. You share a hobby, or you share kids the same age, or, some kind of like you both lived in the same place for a little while. And that's really all networking is. And don't be afraid to tell people what you're looking for. I'm looking for this, and keep me in mind for this thing. And I think that people have opportunities that they can share, and sometimes they don't know who to share it with. And if you are just that person on their mind, they'll think of you. And also when you're networking, the person that you're looking to get mentorship for or networking from, they're not going to reach out to you. And I have many beloved mentors in my life, and they don't hit me up for a call very often. And they love me, but you have to be the one that's making the effort.
Next up, Devenna asks, there seems to be a lot of focus on marketing, data science, and product development. I'm curious about the availability of research roles within the space, and if you guys can speak more to the pros and cons of working in the space.
I can probably start with that one, since I have a research role. And it's a great question, because from what I've seen, the research teams in-house tend to be a little bit smaller. The clinical teams tend to be a little bit smaller at these companies. Like because they are a for-profit, business. It's different than in academia. Your cross-functional partners are an entire marketing team, an entire sales team, an entire engineering team. And so, for example, we have 300 people at Modern Health right now, and our clinical team is about 15 people. And of those, about 3 or 4 of us are on the research team. So they do tend to be smaller in-house research teams. So what I'm also seeing a lot is like outsourcing things and working with consulting firms. And so if you are interested, or like have the capacity, like Ed is giving great tips for consulting right now in terms of what your value proposition is, basically, or what your offer is. Like teams like mine are looking to expand our research capacities, but not necessarily looking to bring someone in full-time in-house. So those are some of the thoughts about sort of availability of the roles, and then pros and cons of working in the space. Like I personally love it. I don't see myself ever going back into academia. The income is great. Like it's enough for me to live in coastal California. And it is more than I would have made at an academic job, but I get to do similar things where I still get to like have a research portfolio in every stage of the scientific method, as I think of it, like planning and, coming up with a research question, planning and design, data collection, analysis, and communication and dissemination. And so I still get to do the science that I love, but just within a very different context. And it also is, for me, nice to be at a company where if I wasn't feeling like my professional values were being met, I could just leave. And that always intimidated me about an academic job where, you think about the stability as something you really want, but also like once you're there, maybe you kind of want to stay there for 30 or 40 years with the same coworkers. And so I kind of appreciate that you could jump around and bounce around. What do you think, Ed?
I'm going to leave it to you on that. Like the research, I mean, my research when I was doing it was very like academic, institutionalized, and I feel like my experience directly doesn't apply as much. Although, I mean, what Sarah's talking about is this is not the ivory tower here. This is everyday life, and whatever it is, it's got to touch people's lives in a way that's meaningful, useful, and that is relevant. So that's all I got.
Next question is from Nikki. Nikki asks, with so many academics moving into the startup VC world, especially probably more so now with federal funding cuts, is there still value in starting a 5 to 7 year PhD program in the coming years if someone is hoping to pivot into industry? On the other hand, are higher level positions in digital mental health companies often allotted to people with PhDs? What are the costs and benefits in today's landscape?
This is when I get a lot. Do you get this a lot?
A little bit. You want to start? I'll.
Yeah, it's such a tough question. I've had so many people ask me, like, should I even start a PhD program? Should I just get a master's? I know I want to go into industry. I'm doing my PhD. Should I even do a postdoc afterwards? And I really don't have the best answer for you. I think what we're seeing is there was like a kind of a first wave of academics leaving into and I'm just prefacing with the startup digital mental health industry, but there was a wave of academics that came in to companies that were a lot more willing to take people straight out of academia, because there were no other clinician scientists. And now we're sort of moving into a second generation where some people do have a few years of experience, and I just recognize that that can be really challenging, and it might feel like less companies are willing to take these more entry level positions. And so right now, I feel like for a director and higher position on a clinical team at a digital health startup, they tend to want you to have some kind of graduate degree. I think we have 3 directors on my team. 2 of them have a PhD, and one of them is a licensed clinical social worker who has an MBA. So not all of the she runs the clinical quality team and spent many, many years at the Blues health insurance plan. So right now it feels like it's a little bit about experience. I really feel like the next wave is going to be merging of positions, like people who might have a psychology background who want to work in product, or vice versa to some extent. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was like, what is your level of risk in working at a startup? Because there can be more opportunity at smaller stage companies, which are more risky. So companies that are pre-seed stage, that are seed stage, they may be more like interested in working with somebody who is straight out of academia, or who has some like consulting experience in industry. But a lot of startups don't work out statistically. And so you sort of have to weigh for yourself the risks and benefits of getting really great experience and working at a smaller place, or holding out and waiting for a larger company where there may be maybe less job opportunities at the moment.
My short answer is no and yes. So I say that because, I mean, if it's hard to know what the world is going to be in 5 years or 7 years. What I do know for myself, my graduate training as a PhD prepared me to do a lot of different things. It wasn't just there was an academic part, there was a clinical part. So it's kind of, it's pay your money and take your chances. I mean, it's not a sure thing, especially in the digital world. And that it's, yeah, I don't want to give you advice what to do, but there are as many reasons not to as there are to do it, my opinion.
Next question is from Anne Marie, who asks, where should people go to learn business concepts in the health industry? Are there online courses or resources, etc.?
Short answer, get a subscription to the Harvard Business Review, right? Like it's 150, whatever, it's $150. You don't have to pay big tuition. I mean, I'm not being facetious, but there are things, marketing. You got to learn marketing. I mean, it's marketing your ideas. It's marketing yourself. It's understanding what that part is. So I would say from a psychologist standpoint, the biggest absent part is business training, frankly. So I agree, but there are a lot of ways to get it.
Yeah, I would love maybe to follow up with Emma on like a few resources that I could share. It's pretty piecemeal. It's a great question because it's pretty piecemeal at this point. There's like some resources I've collected over the years of like if you're still a graduate student or like affiliated with a university, you could link up with some like courses in specific areas like entrepreneurship or user-centered design or take a class in the business school. If you're already out of a university though, like there are a few resources here and there, but it's really a big gap. And one of my mentors is always talking about how an MD MBA is very common. But that's not very common with PhD programs, especially PhD psych programs. And so I feel like there is a big need for this more and more. So maybe, I don't know anything off the top of my head, but I could follow up with Emma if she wants to send something to the listserv afterwards. I've been slowly gathering over the years.
I would love that, Sarah. And in the interest of time, I think we'll end with one more question for Sarah and one more question for Ed. So the question for Sarah is, or I guess twofold questions, is one person is curious about the types of statistical analysis you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Morgan and Andrew asks, what do you think about the value of clinical consultants, advisors that are actively practicing clinicians?
Great. Okay, so the types of statistical analyses. So a lot of the research that we conduct at Modern Health is real world evidence research. They are longitudinal observational studies. So they are using patient-reported outcomes over multiple time points, single arm, basically pre-post trials. And so we're doing a lot of longitudinal data analysis. Some of it can be more complicated and some of it can be more basic, honestly. And you've probably heard a little bit about this is like, oh, when you move into industry, like, sometimes your analyses aren't as complicated. And the reason that is because you also are beholden to translate that research, just like the folks that maybe that have gone into policy or something after their degree, which is I'm doing evidence to inform our product and to share our value to the people that are buying our services, which are HR leaders, benefits leaders, benefits consultants that are helping them. And they are often non-scientists and non-clinicians. So I do have to create this research study and distill it back down to them. So sometimes we'll do more sophisticated longitudinal analyses, and then we'll also do some t-tests, or we'll just do some descriptive like the percentage of people that showed clinical recovery or improvement in PHQ scores over time. And depending on the company, and the stage of the company, a research scientist like me might do all of the analyses and all the research design and the data collection and things like that. But as a company grows, those positions can get split up a little bit more. So right now, I don't do all of the analyses. We use a biostatistician to run our analyses, which also helps with making things more objective. So I just wanted to mention that. And then how do I think about the value of clinical consultants and advisors that are actively practicing clinicians? Those are great. Those might not be somebody that I would necessarily contract with, but folks who are inside I forgot to mention this, but I kind of put almost 3 different categories in as career paths in digital health. The building of the product, which tends to be clinical psychologists a lot of the time, or people with that really deep subject clinical matter expertise. evaluators, which are people like me doing the research, and translators, so people who are communicating the research. And so the build side of the folks can really have a need for some of those more clinical consultants, and especially earlier on when they don't have as many resources in-house. They will want to contract with you and help to build.
Thank you, Sarah. And finally, a question for Ed. Have you practiced and consulted at the same time? Why or why not?
Consulting is a bit of a wild ride. I mean, there's one thing if you're contracting, it's not permanent. Nothing's permanent in life, but if you have a job or you've got a position, a full-time, part-time, when you're consulting, it's about flexibility and what you really want to do, what's your bandwidth. I'd say for me in recent years, I've done a smaller practice after not doing it because I was so busy doing other things. But the consulting business has been more inconsistent in the last few years. So, I work, 3 days a week on one thing. I got a project, and then, I have some time set aside to see clients because I love doing that anyway. I mean, so I've been so focused on how do you design treatments, but there's something to be said about actually doing direct care. But to me, it's really about what's the whole kind of gestalt of what you want your life to be, your career, what's important, how you're, directing your emotional energy of where that is. So I don't see it as a downside, but I do say that, I mean, you can be a KOL, key opinion leader, and a clinician, but you better make sure you're really a KOL and you got the substance there. I mean, it's not, being a consultant, it carries some weight to it and responsibility of what you're bringing to the table. So yeah, to me, it's sure, why not? Yeah.
Well, I think we will stop with questions there. Just in the interest of time, I want to take a minute to thank our two truly tremendous presenters, Ed and Sarah. You both are amazing speakers and incredibly insightful. This really has been one of the most interesting panels that I've attended in a really long time. And I especially like your focus on this piece of values. I think that's something I'm really going to take away from this is, the idea of having
full transparency,
values.
Sarah and I did not talk about values independently. Like we're just meeting for the first time. So we had a little bit of a mind meld. I really appreciate that, Sarah.
We were really in sync, and I really appreciated learning from you today, Ed, and also just the engagement from everybody and all of your questions. Really, really appreciated those. So thank you. Thank you to the Student SIG.
Yeah, thank you all for attending today. And thank you for attending the conference, as I think this is one of our final events. So thank you all so much, and hope to see you at future SDMH
I'm happy
events.
to talk to anyone. Reach out. I'll talk, love talking to people.
Yeah, message me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you.
You.
Thanks for a great
Bye,
conference.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.